Hi guys, I am happy to see you today, and we're going to be taking some notes today on plant adaptations. Just like animals do, plants also have adaptations that allow them to survive in kind of extreme or different environments. So the first thing we need to remember is that structural adaptations are the same for plants as they are for animals. They're a physical part of the plant, like leaves, the trunk, roots. Those are all structural parts that allow them to survive. Because remember, an adaptation is something that allows an organism to survive in its environment. And structural adaptations are a physical part of the plant, right? Part of the plant's body or structure. Behavioral adaptations are the way that organisms are going to act or behave. These can be tropisms, right? We talked a lot about tropisms before we got out for break in December. And tropisms, remember, like phototropism, they move towards the light. Gravitropism or geotropism means they grow towards gravity or towards the earth. And so those tropisms are how plants are able to behave or change what they're doing. Structural adaptations for getting food. So we're going to talk about several different reasons why plants have structural adaptations, and the first reason is to get food. And we know that plants go through photosynthesis, and so they need leaves, which remember have those lots and lots of plant cells with chloroplast, so that they can absorb that energy from the sun and transform it into glucose. Now that glucose has to get transported throughout the whole plant because remember, cellular respiration is going on in all the cells in that plant. So phloem are these special tubes that transport glucose throughout the plant. So that's an internal structural adaptation for a plant. Leaves and stems are going to be external, right? Inside, outside. Structural adaptations that help the plant get water or other nutrients, because we think of plants just needing water, but just like us, they need certain minerals and vitamins in order to go through and be the healthiest that they can be, right? And so roots are those special structures that allow them to absorb water into the plant. And remember, transpiration, which is the evaporation of water through the plant, is the action that pulls water to all parts of the plant through these xylem, which are kind of like tubes in the plant, just like for phloem, except xylem transports water instead of sugars. So phloem is going to transport those sugars. And remember, we have that diagram in your notes from last semester, which might be helpful to you. Xylem is going to transport water, and phloem is going to transport glucose. Both of them are going to transport it all throughout the plant because the plant needs that glucose to go through cellular respiration, and it needs water so that it can go through photosynthesis. Adaptations for reproduction. Just like animals, plants reproduce. And the way that they do this is lots of different ways, right? Some plants are sexual reproducers, meaning that there needs to be a female and a male sex cell that come together in order to make seeds or fruit. And so the way that they are pollinated is that they use animals to pollinate: bees, birds, other insects, butterflies. All of these are attracted by bright colored flowers and smells. That's why flowers smell so nice, right? They have a really nice smell, which attracts these birds and insects to land on them. When they land on them, little pieces of pollen, which are the male sex cell, get on the feet or the beak of these organisms, these animals, and then when they go to the next plant, maybe it's a female plant, and some of that pollen falls off when they land on it. So all of that to allow these plants to reproduce. Another way that they attract animals is that they have sweet fruits, right? Even we like fruits that grow on different plants, right? Strawberries, oranges, apples, pears, fruits like peaches. All of those are attracting animals. And then when animals eat them, they don't pick out the seeds like we do. They eat the seeds, and then they're going to poop out the seeds, right? And those seeds are going to be in that fertilized area of feces that is going to allow them some nutrients to start germinating, which is growing and surviving. Some seeds, like the seeds of dandelions, are shaped to catch the wind. So when the wind blows, it blows the seeds far and wide. When we lived in Nebraska, there were terrible dandelions in all of our yards on our street. So a lot of us went in together and had a guy come and treat all of our yards. Well, there was one neighbor that did not treat their yard. All of our yards after the treatment looked amazing. They didn't have any dandelions, but one neighbor had it. And within 6 weeks, we all had dandelions in our yard again. And that's because those dandelion, make-a-wish seeds blow very easily in the wind and get transported all throughout all of our yards. Now, some adaptations that plants have that are structural adaptations help them to defend themselves from predators, things that want to eat them. And so when we see spikes on a cactus or thorns on a rose bush, those are protecting the plant from all of the things that want to eat it. Even if you've ever grown cucumbers in your yard, they have those little spiky things on the stems that kind of hurt your fingers when you grab them. So all of those are those defense structures to help protect them from predators. If you've ever gotten into some poison ivy or poison oak and you have an allergy to it, they have these toxic oils, and those oils can give us a painful, itchy rash, right? It is not very comfortable. It makes little blisters on your skin. And these are just because those oils are really strong and allow or keep predators from coming to eat their leaves. So they're able to spread and reproduce and do what they do. Now, some organisms live in water, and they have specialized adaptations that help them survive in water. So some structures that help water plants survive in their environment are that a lot of times their stems are really flexible, and that's because currents and movement in the water can move those stems just like wind can. But water is a lot heavier, and so it pushes a lot harder. And so those flexible stems don't break, they just bend whenever there's movement. Floating seeds are another way that those types of plants can help survive. And a lot of these plants actually have air pockets at the base of where the leaves start, like lily pads, to help the leaves float and lay flat on top of the water so that they can still absorb that sunlight, because they're still going through photosynthesis, just like land plants. Some plants are parasites, meaning that they draw nutrients from another living plant. They don't require soil, and these can be harmful to another plant. For example, mistletoe. We always think about mistletoe as a Christmas time treat, but mistletoe is actually a parasitic plant, and you see it on the right side in the picture of the tree with all of those green bundles. All of those green bundles are mistletoe bundles, and they are growing into that tree and sucking nutrients that the tree has in order to feed themselves. So, but parasitic plants do exist. A couple more parasitic plants in our reading yesterday. You guys may have read at the end of the book about the Rafflesia, the corpse flower. It smells like rotten flesh, rotten meat, and that helps attract flies to it. And those flies pick up the pollen and they take it to other flowers. But what happens when the pollen lands on other flowers is that it's a parasite, and so it can grow and invade that plant and take over. Yellow rattle is another example of a parasitic plant that can grow on different plants in nature. Some plants, very few, right, but some, I'm sure the Venus flytrap you guys have heard of, are carnivorous. And that means that they can actually consume animals for their nutrients. They don't have to go through photosynthesis to get all of the nutrients that they need. They get some of their food by trapping and consuming small animals like frogs, but usually, most of the time, it's insects. Because they can eat bugs, they can live in areas with really poor soil, like the floor of the rainforest. And I know it's easy to think of the rainforest with all of these big, lush plants, but remember, those big, lush plants are going to suck all of the nutrients out of the soil. And so there's not much left for smaller plants like Venus flytraps. Another one is the cobra lily. And the cobra lily is kind of got this hook shape, and so flies can get in, but then they can't find their way out. And so if you look in that picture on the left, you can see that there's a fly trapped in there. And if it goes far enough down, it has this goo, kind of like what lines the inside of Venus flytrap. And that goo basically dissolves that fly or that animal, and allows it to absorb the nutrients that it needs to survive from that organism. Here's a couple of other pictures of some carnivorous plants. This is a sundew on the right side. You can see that it's got these kind of spider-like fingers that kind of envelop and trap. It looks like a bee or a scorpion maybe. And it works the same way. It dissolves those nutrients from that organism so that it can take in those nutrients from that animal instead of from the soil. Pitcher plants are another way. They have a cup-shaped flower, and that flower holds water that smells really yummy, but then they fall into the water and they can't get out. And that water has some enzymes in it that help break down those insects and small animals and absorb nutrients from those. All right, so we talked about all of those really cool structures that some plants have, and I just want to remind you guys that plants also have behaviors, right? Behavioral adaptations are going to be adaptations that allow them to get food. And so especially tropisms, and we're just going to kind of do a quick review of the tropisms that we covered before Christmas break. Plants that lean or grow towards the sun are exhibiting phototropism. And you can see that on the right side where we've turned the plant away from the window and now the plants are shifting their direction to grow so that they can absorb the most sunlight, get the most energy from the sun so that they can grow the most. Roots growing down into the soil towards the pull of gravity is their example of geotropism. Roots grow down. Even if the plant is tilted, the roots are still going to grow down into the ground. If you've ever gotten a really crooked live Christmas tree, this is what happens when we have a geotropism that is not straight up and down, right? When we have a tilted trunk and then our roots grow straight down. The other two tropisms that we talked about before Christmas break are thigmotropism, right? That's the touch, right, is initiated by touch. This is how vines are able to climb up in order to catch more sunlight. And then, of course, when roots grow towards water, that's our hydrotropism. It's growing towards a water source to be able to get more water so that it can grow and go through photosynthesis. Other behaviors that some plants can exhibit are dormancy. Not only desert flowers, but lots of trees that are hardwood trees like oaks go through dormancy for winter. That's why a lot of trees lose their leaves in the fall or when it starts to get cold. It allows them to go dormant for a season, conserve all of their nutrients and energy so that when spring comes, they can put all of their effort into reproducing. And so desert flowers can do this as well, only coming to life when it rains. They can just hold on to their seeds, their pollen, and wait until it's a good time for them to be able to reproduce. Plants also allow seeds to drop, right? Nuts are a form of seed. Acorns are seeds. Lots of trees produce seeds, and when they drop them on the ground, that allows the new offspring to grow from those seeds. Sometimes those seeds are taken and moved by animals, and sometimes they might even sprout where they are. We have in our backyard a mountain laurel. They're those trees that have those little pods that are like this long. They look kind of like giant pea pods or like a soybean pod. But those mountain laurels, when they drop those pods, they often will sprout little small trees from those pods. So we've got one big mountain laurel tree and a couple little small ones that are sprouting up underneath. I just wanted you guys to remember that all organisms, whether it's an animal or a plant, are going to go through adaptation. It's a slow process. It doesn't happen over time. I mean, it doesn't happen quickly. It happens over a long period of time, right? When Darwin went and explored the Galapagos Islands, he didn't think these finches all just decided to have different food sources one day. This happened over years and years and years of natural selection happening after generations reproduce, after they grow, they develop, the stronger survive, the more adapted to their environment survive, and the ones who are not do not. And so I just want to remind you guys that all species experience adaptation, right? So if we are looking at some just application of what we've been talking about, let's talk about how lions are specially adapted. Why do you think that the eyes of a lion are set in the front of their head rather than on the sides like a bunny? A bunny has eyes that are on the sides, right? But lions, like us, have eyes that are in the front of their face. Why do you think that's so? Think about what a lion needs to do to get food, right? It helps them to have that depth perception like we have. We can tell how far something is away and to judge how long or hard they're going to have to jump or propel themselves when they're hunting. And so lions have that predator eye right in the front of their eye, in the front of their head, instead of on the sides like a prey animal. What do you think the purpose is for the mane? Why do they have this big coat of fur around their neck? What's the reason for that? And why do they have this color? Knowing what you know about adaptations, you should be able to tell me that that thick mane helps to serve as protection. Remember, lions are pack animals. They live in a pride or a group, and the strongest male is the one that gets to reproduce the most, right? And so they fight. They fight to be the strongest male in the group. And so when they fight, that mane helps teeth from getting into that neck area. It gets caught in all the fur, right? And of course, you guys should be able to know that the tawny brown color helps them to hide in their environment. What about giraffes? Why are giraffes able to go for a long period of time without water? I think it's so funny if you guys look at that picture, how a giraffe has to drink and they kind of have to squat down like that. They can go for a long time without water because they rely on the water content of the food that they eat. Remember, giraffes, for the most part, are vegetation. They're going to eat vegetation from trees. And so they can get a lot of vegetation in their diet, which lets them get their water. Other organisms like koalas do this as well, right? They eat a lot of plants, and plants hold a lot of water, right? And that xylem of their trunks and in their leaves. And so that water content that's in their food allows them to go a longer period of time without drinking water. How are the long necks adapted to giraffes' lifestyles? I think you guys should be able to answer this. This is thought to have given them an advantage to help them spot predators, right? Because they can see way high up, see them coming from far away, and to reach food. I told my in-person classes, and I can't remember if I told you guys, but giraffes have the same number of vertebrae as we do, right? The same number of backbones. The difference is our vertebrae are about this thick, and giraffe vertebrae are about this thick, right? So just an interesting fact. How do zebras defend themselves? They're this crazy black and white striped horse-looking animal. How do they protect themselves? Well, they can run really fast. They can also, if you've ever been around a horse, kick and bite just like horses can. That coloration also plays a role in evading predators. Some think that it confuses predators whenever they see the black and white stripes, that they're not able to gauge that depth perception and distance as well because of the black and white stripes give them a false shadow. There's lots of different opinions, but that's the most common one. I hope that helps you guys understand a little bit more about how plants are adapted and how some animals use their adaptations to survive. I look forward to next week, and I hope you guys have a great Friday.